Most of us probably have the same idea in mind when we hear the word home. A modest home with a few bedrooms in the customary style. However, for some people, their homes actually go against all preconceived notions of what a home may and should be. These are the top 10 strangest places where people actually live. Number 10, Mount Fanjing. Any brave tourist must ascend more than 8,000 steps to get to this location. Even though it's far to travel, the temple is not your typical location. In the Wuling mountain range in southwest China, perched atop Mount Fanjing, the two modest Buddhist temples that are supported by the Red Cloud's Golden Peak, a naturally occurring rock spire, have a distinguished history spanning more than 500 years. Can you even begin to comprehend how the Buddhists were able to bring all of the building supplies up that precarious mountainside to construct those early temples? It is still somewhat of a mystery to everyone to this day. Imagine carrying a standard backpack and your own body weight all the way up. As harsh weather and powerful winds are now a reality at these kinds of altitudes, the structures have been renovated more recently using sturdier materials to assist the temples endure them. The location is a particular favorite of all those people who enjoy using drone cameras. And fortunately for us, that means that we can all take a look at one of the strangest places on Earth without having to exert ourselves physically by carrying our flimsy bodies up a mountainside. That's good news. Number 9, Yakutsk. The world's coldest city officially. Yakutsk is the world's coldest city and makes the list of one of the strangest places in the world to live in. This Russian province in Siberia routinely experiences temperatures of below -44 degrees Fahrenheit. That's just a little bit chilly. You might think the temperature is already cold enough, but you might be surprised to learn that it can actually become colder. The record-breaking low temperature here was a whopping -83.9 degrees Fahrenheit, which was measured in February 1987. How could humans even survive in such extreme temperatures? It appears that a large coat will probably fall short of providing adequate protection from the cold. This town of around 300,000 people is located about 280 miles south of the Arctic Circle. And they get along just fine during the summer. But when the cold arrives and sets in, life becomes extremely difficult. Indeed, in a place like this during the winter, such things that we might take for granted cease to be possible. Wearing spectacles is suddenly impossible. They'd simply freeze in front of your face. Driving is another difficult issue. Cars must run continuously for 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, because if they stop, there is no way on earth you can start them again until the weather gets better. And if you want to buy milk, it comes in the form of a frozen block. When you add to these basic difficulties the fact that it is only daytime for about 4 hours a day in the winter and 21 hours a day in the summer, things become even more perplexing. This place is just extremely strange. Before we continue with this video, hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell to be notified whenever we post another video like this. Number 8, Setenil de las Bodegas. Setenil de las Bodegas is a beautiful and unique location in the southern Spanish region of Andalusia. This is one of the towns known as a white village, or Pueblo Blanco in Spanish. It's obviously due to the fact that the buildings in the village are all painted white. The uniformity of these places is one of their charms, but this particular village, while painted white like the others, is also quite unique and one of the strangest places to live in the world. Many of the houses in this pueblo have been built into the sides of the rock cliff, which protects them from the hot sun by creating a kind of shaded terrace in front of many of the buildings. The temperature inside the rock is also much more controlled. People do live in these houses in this part of Spain, rather than being at the mercy of the baking sun. But it's such an attractive place for tourists that it's perhaps no longer able to offer what you might call a truly authentic experience, whatever that might be. However, it is undeniably beautiful. Number 7, Hanging Temple of Hang Shan. The Hanging Temple is a popular tourist attraction in the Ditong area of Shanghai Province, China. And this is certainly an unusual location, even if it isn't technically in the woods. The 1,500-year-old temple is built 246 feet above ground, which presumably adds a sense of excitement to the daily ritual of worship in this place, or would if that was truly what it was all about. The temple is now a historic site, but it's also a tourist attraction due to the bizarre idea of a building just hanging off the side of a cliff. The temple itself is the only existing location in China that combines three of China's traditional philosophies, namely Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. Although it appears to dangle there, the structure is attached to the cliff with huge oak beams that are attached in holes chiseled into the rock, so it's probably safe. Even so, I wouldn't do any jumping jacks while visiting. After all, it's been there for a millennium and a half, making it one of the strangest places in the universe. Number 6, Chong, Khneas. A floating village located in Cambodia's Siam Reef region. Tonle Sap Lake is Southeast Asia's largest freshwater lake. This place is not only home to a large number of fish, but it is also a place where many people live, and not just on the outside, as you might think. In fact, and this may sound a little crazy, there are apparently over 1 million people living on this lake, the majority of whom live in houseboats on the surface of the water. This is due to the lake itself. It's a fantastic source of fish, with over 200 different species living there. The lake is actually one of the world's richest fishing grounds. On the lake, there are numerous smaller pockets of inhabited areas. These are then easily distinguished as distinct villages. Chong Khneas is one such village, and it is home to over 1,000 families who live and work on the lake. The problem is that these people are exploited by the tourist industry, which appears to send tours to look at them and engages in some clearly unethical practices. Despite the fact that they are profiting from their way of life, these tourists show no regard or engage in any beneficial interaction with the local communities. But, yes, there are people who live here. That much is true. Number 5, Coober Pedy. There are many strange things to see in the Australian outback. You know, stuff that can kill you, stuff that hasn't been seen in hundreds of years, and miles of scorched earth where nothing but the occasional snake lives. But, right in the middle of the desert, there's also a mining town where people live underground. Coober Pedy is an opal mine in the South Australian desert, about 8 hours from Adelaide in the south or Alice Springs in the north. Coober Pedy is an off-the-grid town that is mostly hidden underground. Many of the town's residents live in dugouts, which are cave-like dwellings in which they can protect themselves from the bitterly cold and intensely hot seasons. The Australian desert has little else in between, but these underground homes are still extraordinary places to live. They are hewn from the rock, but they are alive with the lives and personalities of those who live on Coober Pedy. The people who live here are forced by necessity to adopt a new way of life. They must be resourceful, skilled, and problem solvers if they are to survive in one of the harshest environments on the planet. Number 4, Hallstatt, China. Although Hallstatt is one of Austria's most beautiful villages, this particular Hallstatt is in China. That's correct. It is, in fact, an exact replica of an ancient European village that has been completely rebuilt in China's Guangdong province. This is completely bizarre, but it takes all kinds nowadays, doesn't it? So, how does an obscure Austrian town end up being recreated on the other side of the world? Actually, China has a bit of a habit of doing things like this. Some Chinese architects and urban planners appear to have a penchant for recreating famous and not-so-famous landmarks in various locations across the country. There are full-scale replicas of famous sites such as the Sphinx and the Eiffel Tower, as well as Venetian canals and apparently Austrian villages. Hallstatt, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Austria, has stood in its original location for hundreds of years, looking like a fairy tale land, as many places in Europe wish to do. However, this Chinese replica has only been around since 2012. Currently, there is a distinction between the two. Nonetheless, even if it is a little disconcerting to find yourself suddenly up an Austrian mountain in the heart of China. And, yes, there are people who live here. The plan was to sell properties in this new Hallstatt to wealthy Chinese people who couldn't afford to buy in the original Austrian town. But what are your thoughts on all of this strangeness? What famous locations do you want to see recreated in your town? Let's talk about such nonsense in the comments section, shall we? Number 3, Cliff Village. This small village in China is called something I'm not going to try to pronounce. It's easy to see why the area is known as a cliff village. The village is perched all the way up on a 2,600-foot high cliff. And, thanks to the wonders of the internet, it's recently become a well-known tourist attraction. Previously, the village was inhabited by residents who were extremely poor and lived on the verge of extinction. to the point where they took their lives into their own hands whenever they scaled the side of the cliff to return home. The village was previously only accessible via a series of extremely wonky rattan ladders. To be honest, even though the ladder situation has improved, this still appears to be a little risky to me. The village received a large financial investment from the local government in 2016, and a new steel ladder would take the place of the previous, rickety ones. That ladder has 2,556 steps and is nearly 2 miles long. The swanky new ladder would cost nearly $150,000 to build, but it is intended to make climbing up and down safer for the villagers. This is now a hot spot for numpties filming videos for the old social media, and safety is critical when these people are poking their selfie sticks all over the show. But imagine what it must be like to live in this place. What if you get all the way to the bottom and realize you forgot to bring your wallet? Number 2, Sanctuario Madonna della Corona. This remarkable location is built over 2,000 feet above sea level into the vertical face of a cliff. That's one way to protect the Sanctuary of the Lady of the Crown, as it's known in Italy, which is perched on such a sheer drop that it almost appears to be suspended, incomplete, in midair. Although it appears to be suspended in midair, the establishment is actually built on a very narrow rock shelf on the side of Mount Baldo. It can only be reached by a very narrow path from below and a street from above. The original intention of this extraordinary place was to be a refuge for holy men to come and engage in some silent reflection in a place completely isolated from the rest of the world. The church itself was built in 1530, and the site eventually became a place where anyone could make a pilgrimage and contemplate God in peace. The sanctuary survived the turmoil of the 20th century and continues to provide a peaceful haven for visitors and pilgrims alike. Number 1, Matmata, Tunisia. The otherworldliness of Matmata troglodyte homes in southern Tunisia is unlike anything else on the planet. These remarkable structures are a link to the fascinating North African country's ancient past, as well as a major draw for tourism in the area. These ancient homes, of course, are literally dug into the landscape, with a network of centuries-old passageways and chambers. Matmata is located on the outskirts of the Sahara Desert, 20 miles south of the country's capital, in a landscape of palm trees and olive groves. These structures have been inhabited for centuries and are still inhabited by many of North Africa's indigenous people. These houses are a living, breathing testament to the culture and history of these people and their surroundings. Because there is almost no wood or stone in this region to build with, the dwellings were dug out of the ground. People who lived there found that going underground, where the temperature was naturally regulated, was an ideal way to avoid the heat of the desert. Every house built here follows a basic construction pattern that includes a central sunken courtyard, often with a well. And from this central point, there are usually several small rooms or chambers connected by passageways. A ladder or a tunnel would be required to gain access. What do you think of these amazing houses? Would you like to live in a cave like this? Please let me know in the comments section below. Check out the other cool stuff that's appearing on the screen, and I'll see you next time.